Hi there, and thank you for clicking on my video. Today we're going to be talking about the Shade Prime. Came out with the Hildren Prime Access and is now farmable. Overall viewed, the release itself as not one of the best. I'm not going to say it's the worst, but this is one of the worst. Not the worst, but one of the worst. The Shade basically is a standard Sentinel. Its uniqueness and its contribution revolves around a preset mod that you get from Samaras, the ambush. So we're actually going to spend most of the time in this video talking about this. Other than that, in terms of a build, it is a standard Sentinel build. You either build it to deal damage with assault mode, which you could honestly get away with if you're joining it with Hildren. Since Hildren will be able to shield gate the Sentinel for you and provide it with extra shields. But the build for it is pretty standard. I have it set up for running Hildren. Ghost is the preset mod that this is known for, as well as Ambush. You get Ghost when you build the Shade. Ambush is a standing turn-in with Samaras. And let's go over what each of these does. Prime Regen allows it to regen if it dies 3 times. If you don't have this, run regular regen. Animal Instinct is the same thing. It gives you loot radar, enemy radar. If you don't have the Prime, run the regular one. It's fine, just wait for Barrow to pick it up. Assault mode, you should have a pile of these. Vacuum. I could see if you're a brand new player and not having played the game for a while, maybe it would be an issue getting this. Because it's not exactly a rare drop, but there is going to be a time period where you will have fetch before you have vacuum. So if you don't have it and you bought the Prime Access, not that I would really recommend this too much for like a bronze mod, but it might be worthwhile buying this. Let me see what this is actually for before. Vacuum, this has got to be like 3p. Yeah, 3 plat. Obviously price gouging. To be honest, if you're in a clan, you could probably get this for free. And maxed is 10p. It's because of the endo, even though I'd say that's a little bit too much. But if you're in a clan, you can probably just get this from a clan member. It's vacuum. People have a ton of them. So vacuum to pick up stuff on the ground. Guardian, I would highly recommend, specifically if you're playing with Hildren, because when your shield runs out, it'll refill it. I think it's got like a 30-second cooldown on it. There is a cooldown associated with this. You can find it on the wiki. Calculated redirection for more shields. Pretty straightforward. Takes it from 100 to 375. So most of the mods are pretty common sense if you're familiar with modding. Not a big deal. Synth Deconstruct and Synth Fiber. I run these as comfort picks. These aren't as effective, admittedly, on something like compared to, say, like the Panzer, where they apply on everything. So we are going to mod the Sentinel weapon to sort of help out with this a little bit. Gas Electric, if you know what I'm talking about. So let's talk about Ambush and Ghost. They recently buffed Ghost, not above Stalk, which is the similar mod, but for Kubros, but brought it in line. This had a garbage radius when it first started out. So they brought it in line with Stalk. And to be honest, I think the fact that it's now in line with Stalk obviously sort of blurs the line between which one is better. Because if you can shield gate your pet like you can with Hildren, um, the issue is going to be is that in this circumstance, I think it's the Hurus. Let me check real quick. Yeah, the Hurus. Um, in this circumstance, you would actually want the Hurus. And you could even go with like a mecha set, which is what I have this belt for. Um, so let's I'm gonna attempt to sell to you the Shade Prime because there is something unique and it does revolve around ambush. Um, so pretty basic. It's not that unique of a Sentinel anymore. So let's go over the weapon that it gets. The Burst Laser Prime. It is a pistol. If you are a heat inherit enjoyer, I would suggest modding this for as much heat and faction damage as possible. You could even do like a mecha set build to get the faction damage through the roof and the multipliers on it. You can do some pretty nutty stuff with this because it's a pistol, so you have access to the primed heated charge. And that's probably the biggest selling point to this, is that it's a pistol, so you have access to the primed heated charge for the multipliers, scorch, faction damage, and even like a sentinel weapon. And I've tried that before, and that's actually a pretty good time. And considering you're most likely going to be running this with Hildren, defense strip is going to be regularly on hand. Depending on how much strength you run. I've even tried running Hildren with this combo on a Heat Inherit build, using Hildren to strip, and I've gotten 20 minutes into like a Steel Pass survival with just casting the two, and the Mecha Sec Nuke. It starts out kind of slow, but obviously as the dot builds up, you can hit 100Ks pretty regularly. But just building for status is what I would recommend to start out. If you don't have any of the 60/60 mods, you might not have Jolt. That's a Barrow mod. Scorch, you should have a couple of. Pistol Pestilence, you damn sure should have a pile of these. Just mod for the 90 mods. Suppress, reduce the gunfire that the enemy, or reduce the chance that an enemy will hear gunfire by 100%. This helps tremendously with sentinels not getting aggro. So if you run around a corner and there's enemies there, and you haven't hit them yet, and you're, say, running at enemies, and the sentinel shoots them, the enemies are going to turn around and shoot at the sentinel. This prevents that. Seekers to just help out a little bit with the punch through, but it's not 100 pennies on the dollar effective, because where normally, and I'll show it, because the sentinel is higher, it's shooting down. So unless you're far away, you're not really going to get the ideal punch through effect, because most of the time if you're close to something, say you're using melee, it's going straight into the ground. But if you're, say, running like an assault rifle, you can get multiple hits on multiple enemies, especially if you're like going up an elevated hill. This can easily get multiple hits, and we're going to be using gas electric, so the sentinel can be applying as much damage as possible in terms of damage to enemies, and not in terms of the amount of damage, because if you notice, we don't have any damage mod, we don't have any crit mods. It's just multi-hit or multi-shot, fire rate, little quality of life, silence, and status. And it's so we can proc synth deconstruct and synth fiber as much as possible. If you choose to run this on a frame that uses equilibrium. Now, obviously, if we're pairing it with Hildren, basically if you get into health, you're kind of dead, especially in Steel Path. So this isn't too big of a deal on Hildren, but if you're running, say, this with another frame, this could definitely help. So I run this regardless. I'm pretty addicted to it. And if you are running this with another frame, you could swap out Guardian for enhanced vitality. and do like a metal fiber enhanced vitality if you have something that can heal, right? So the issue with Sentinels is that it's harder to keep them alive, even though prime regen is definitely a thing. Eventually, just AoE weapons like a bombard comes along, and they just explode, right? So it is what it is. But because of ambush, the shade is actually relatively easy to keep alive. I mean, it's still gonna die, but all right. So let's talk about ambush. There we go. So you get within range, 24 meters. We're at 22, 23. I won't back up anymore just in case it deactivates. The thing about, or not ambush, about Ghost is that as long as you don't fire your weapon or your pistol, have to give it a couple of seconds. There we go. Primary fire, secondary fire brings you out of stealth. There we go. And just from meleeing can pull you out of stealth. So it seems kind of lame, right? So, but the big thing is that we'll get back in stealth. Warframe abilities don't count. So the Shade and the Hurus are actually pretty solid pets for a support frame where other people are going to be doing damage and you're running, say, like a Necros or something, and you're not really doing like a full loot setup, or you're trying to run like a Trinity or something. You can easily stay alive in higher level content if you're just trying to spam abilities and keep your team alive. Say with like Trinity, for example, you could run this setup and almost not have to run casting speed, because as long as you're in the enemies and say you're doing a camp or you're running like a survival or something, even if you're casting and an enemy just is within 24 meters, because the thing is that it doesn't require line of sight. So let's get rid of this. We'll stay down here, and it should reactivate in a couple seconds. So you can actually be pretty well hidden, and the ghost function will just keep you stealth. So if you're like new to Trinity or something, and you just need a gimme to stay alive with like a support, you can run this on a support pretty easily and stay alive, right? So that's basically the bonus of the ghost function. But the other one is let's go to semi, is the ambush function. And I want you to look up here. You'll see it pop up. It says 240 right there in the top. What that is giving is it's giving with the same modifier as Serration or like a Hornet Strike. For a couple of seconds after you come out of stealth, it's giving you 240 base damage. And it's additive. It's not faction damage or anything cool. So, about the best way to sell this mod is that if you are new to Steel Path and to figuring out what your build is, and you could just use a little bit more damage at the start of the mission, this can be a great crutch. So you can get your scalings up. Because remember at the start, like you've heard me say it before, and like some of the other videos, the first one's the hardest. Well, the ambush mod makes it significantly easier. Because the ambush mod, because it's additive, is most effective when you don't have any stacks, and if you don't have any base damage on the weapon. So let's go look at the modding and we'll figure out exactly what we're dealing with. Okay, so we can prove a point. Alright, so we have a Riven with 169 damage, serration for 165, and heavy caliber for 165. So it's a little bit of math. It's not going to be that boring, but we need to get numbers. Okay, so we have 100% for the base damage of the weapon, plus heavy caliber, plus the Riven, plus 169, plus serration, plus 165. Okay, so we're at 599 base damage, like core damage. If ambush is additive, the only thing it's going to do is just go plus 240. Okay, so we need to test the non-stealth bonus and then the stealth bonus. And we're going to figure out what those numbers are. Alright. So we don't have stealth. 288. And then we're going to stealth. Give it a second. And 403. So to figure out what our ratio is, right? So we have 599 and 389. So we have 403 divided by 288 is 139, 39% increase, right? Or 139% of base damage. So we're going to check 839 divided by 599. It's a rounding error, so it's additive to base damage. Now, this might not seem like a big deal, right? Like what does this mean? If it was multiplicative, 599, right, would have been 599 times 2.4. Sorry, 3.4. So it would have been this damage, right? So it's the giveaway, it's additive, it applies to base damage. So the best way to sell it, really, and I'm trying here, is if you're running like a one-shot build on a weapon with like an insane reload, right? Like the Queller, okay? Where you want to be able to come out of stealth and bop something. The Shade could help you because it's additional base damage. For people running like Queller alt fire builds, this could help a lot because it would give you 240 base damage. If you're using the Deadhead Arcane, you wouldn't need to keep the stacks up because the Deadhead gives you the headshot bonus. You would come out of stealth with plus 240 to your base damage already, and you wouldn't need to get the stacks. So it would be a big, big bonus to start out with, but obviously if you're keeping the arcane stacked, the bonus is a little bit less. It's only going to boost your damage, give or take 50%. So that's the best way to sell this. Now, honestly, it's not great, but if you're constantly triggering it, it can be a nice, more comfortable play style, I will say. So as you're running from group to group, say you got like a big Czar or something like that, if you're still using that, or a Tonkor, you can run into a group of enemies, the Ghost will trigger if you're running from group to group and there's at least 8 seconds since you de-stealthed. You can run to the next group, rolling guard into them, and especially if you're using Hildren, pillage into them, rolling guard, just use whatever you want as a gap closer. The stealth will trigger. You can strip, and with a big AoE weapon, if you have Prime Sure-Footed, nuke that group with the additional base damage from ambush. And you'll get a big damage bonus that'll help you pop groups of enemies. Obviously, that's kind of not the meta play style for Warframe. It's, even though it's slowed way down from the AoE nerfs, you're still trying to speed clear. But if you're trying to get a handle on something or test out a new weapon or something, or get additional base damage, the ambush mod is very situational and niche. but you can make it work. Like 240 base damage when the average build nowadays doesn't have any base damage on it, right? There's no base damage on this. If I didn't have it on the Riven, it wouldn't be here. So it can help you get those first couple of kills so your arcane can stack up, right? So Merciless gives 30 damage. Let's see what that works out to. I think it's 8, but we'll check anyway. I said 8. Yeah, 8. So when you come out of stealth for that first group, you've already got the equivalent of 8 stacks of Merciless. So you can stack up your damage against the first group of enemies, right? It's a nice little quality of life. Is it really worth dumping a bunch of Forma into it? I would say no. Because still, the pet isn't invincible. You can run, though that isn't too much of an issue anymore with the hard reset mod on your Parazon. It's a rare drop. Good luck with that. Railjack, I would suggest farming all of these up, obviously, but I'm a bit of a completionist. But if you look at what it says, execute 3 mercy kills within 40 seconds to revive a fallen sentinel or companion. Keeping your sentinels alive temporarily is still an issue, but in terms of playing a mission and then losing your sentinel forever after its 3 deaths is gone. Okay? You can mercy kill really quick and get the sentinel back. One of the tricks I like to use, just to bring it up, is I like running the Zacti as a secondary because it has forced impact on it on the direct hit. So if you see like an Eximus, you run up to it with the Zacti, blast it a couple times and spam X, and you're probably going to get that mercy kill, right? Because you need to be able to get the stacks of impact to increase the execute, and you just run through and just grab Eximus real quick, and boom, you've got your sentinel back. So the idea of doing a mission where you don't have your sentinel for the rest of the mission at some point, that's gone. You can get them back. There's also I forget the name of the augment, but there is an augment for Protea that can bring back pets. Let me look it up. Okay, it's called Repair Dispensary. And it works on allies, apparently. I've honestly never used that, so take that with a grain of salt. It's probably bullshit, but if it works, that's awesome. But I know this works on your pet. So if you're having issues with like higher level content and you are like a Protea main or a Chad Protea enjoyer, you can just easily get your Sentinel back. You just drop it down and you just get it back, right? I guess that's good for Helios later in the game, right? If you're trying to get those scans in like Steel Path. But with Ambush and Ghost, it's a nice quality of life adjustment. The build isn't that sane. And the final thing I would recommend is the Burst Laser, is just never use it. Level it. I threw some Forma into it to see what kind of damage it did. It's kind of mediocre. And it's only because it's been power crept by things like the Verglass, which I even turned standing in to get a Riven for. Took a while, but hey, there it is. Just wish the fire rate wasn't the negative. But this would be the best option. Yeah, there's just it's just not much of a comparison. Especially if you're running like a Heat Inherit build. I don't know if y'all. I guess I'll talk about that for a second. The Heat Inherit, which I would say would be pretty cool, if it was the pistol, right? But you can actually get some pretty nutty heat damage out of it just to try to sell the Burst Prime Laser, because you only need one status, right? So you would do Heat, Scorch, whatever faction you're up against, and fire rate to try to get that proc as soon as possible. And what's the other one? You could probably go double status chance and do like a viral. Something like this. Because you only need heat to proc once, right? So what's the big deal about it? Well, you have the Scorch, you have Primed Heated Charge, and the Expel. But one of the other mods, if you really want to geek out with the heat inherit, is there's actually, and it works really well on the Sentinel weapon, right, for the Shade, is this Fired Up mod is actually multiplicative. So it's better than a faction mod, and it's another multiplier on top of the faction mod. So if you're trying to get like a quick, massive heat stack, this can be a pretty dank way to do it. If you're trying to like hyper focus on something, is it worth forming this up? I wouldn't say so. But this is the weapon, if you were to choose, this is definitely the weapon to do it, because everything else would need a Riven. Because they don't have access to the primed heated charge mod, because this is the only pistol. So if you're trying to do like a heat inherit build and really max that shit out, faction as much of the heat weighting as possible, and everything else is to try to increase the chance of getting the heat mod. You want as much status as possible, and something like this would get you a really, really, really nasty heat proc with the Fired Up mod. And you would just like drop it in here or something, right? So it would give you a nice juicy heat proc. So that's the only real alternative. The Shade is just, in my opinion, completely outclassed by, say, like the Panzer. The infinite revives on this with no effort on your part is just, it's just too strong. The revive on this is just, it's insanely strong. And considering the other stuff just requires you to go over and pick it up, right? And revive it. That the fact that in order to get the Sentinel to safely work and make it an honest option, you kind of need to have the hard reset mod if you're running through Steel Path. I would say it's just too much of a requirement, because this is a rare drop, and the Parazon mods are way later in the game for a new person to be running with this. I mean, obviously, if you're new, run with your little Helios, right? Like I did it too. But the hard reset to really make the Sentinels worthwhile, this allows you to run the Sentinels wherever you want. You just got to be willing to do executes, and you can get them back no problem. And because the Shade has the stealth ability, it makes you better. And the ambush gives you a really nice damage bonus and keeps you from being in those awkward situations where, like, say you decide to go like full scaling on your setup. I'm known to do it also. But it's not an issue at lower levels, but if it's like way higher level, right? Sometimes you can get into awkward situations where you don't have the damage to kill something fast enough. So the ambush is a nice gimmick, a nice crutch to make that super easy. And to be honest, going stealth in the middle of a fight and being able, you can literally just not kill anything. Like on Hildren, you would do pillage, rolling guard, pillage, and not shoot anything, and you'll just stealth in the middle of a fight, like a middle of a group of enemies, and you can just sit there and just wait for your shield to recharge. So it's a nice little quality of life thing. If you're new to the game or you're having trouble in Steel Path, I would say that's where the Shade absolutely shines at. Is if you're brand new to Steel Path, this can be really nice quality of life help. The extra damage at the start, especially if you're trying to get your new arcanes buffed up, the Steel Path arcanes, and the ambush gives you a nice damage bonus at the start. If you're having trouble with that, say like if you don't have like hammer shot or something, where you're starting to get into those rare drops. But it's a niche sentinel. Um, but it completely changes your play style because you get so used to jumping in and out of stealth. But the big combination is in order for this to be like, oh, maybe you want to put some forma into it, or you got some forma to kill. Man, you really need ambush. It completely changes the play style. Like you can abuse this, especially if you're running like what is it, like frostbite. You can get some pretty nutty damage out of stuff. Like I've tried this with like a frostbite build, and if you're willing to go stealth and then exit or uh, try to abuse the mechanic, you can actually get some pretty nutty damage with frostbite builds because you can outsource your damage temporarily onto this, and then maybe swap over to like a secondary or something. So it's a weird play style, but you can get some pretty nutty damage on it because this is stronger than any other base damage mod, unless it's like a Riven on like a really high dispo weapon, right? Everything except for the arcanes, because like what, Hornet Strikes 220, Serrations 165, right? So and the prime point blank is 165, I think. So this is stronger, and that's where this really shown in the past, is where it's stronger than the base damage mods you have access to. So the closest one's Hornet Strike. So it's a weird play style, but if you're trying to get used to playing like a support, this can actually be like a pretty solid help because it'll give you a chance to like stop and like if you get drained by like an energy leech, just stop shooting shit. Rolling guard, stop shooting shit. Operator doesn't interrupt the shield or the invisibility. So you can actually be pretty safe. And part of the reason why I've been running this is, if any of you watched Rainbow Moose's video on the abilities that keep your frame from going invulnerable, well, you just take the shade and anything that runs near you turns the frame invisible because of Ghost. So in terms of like those awkward situations where like you're running through and your operator and all of a sudden you get yanked back to your frame and you have like 2 health, like those situations disappear. So that's why I've been using this. But until maybe that gets fixed, maybe we figure out a better way to deal with it. But like those awkward situations, especially when you're running around on the Zeraman and there's so much stuff jumping everywhere, kind of gets rid of that. And to be honest, I don't mind it. So anyway, I hope this helps. It was a little bit longer of a rant, but I just wanted to give as much of an explanation as I could talk about in terms of how to use this weapon, how to use the Sentinel. It's an interesting niche tool in your toolbox, at least. And it is better than the Prisma Shade. I was surprised about that, where it's like, especially the pistol is a really solid upgrade to the Prisma Shade. So it is what it is. At least it was an upgrade. I wish the Larkspur was an upgrade, but at least this one is an upgrade for a Sentinel. So anyway, y'all have a blessed day. Take it easy. Thank you for watching my video. Stay excellent. Have a blessed day.